That's exactly what happened to Tasha Hill, a 24-year-old waitress working double shifts just to keep the lights on. One rainy night she spotted a car crash on a deserted road. She could have walked away, but something told her to stop. Inside was a stranger, bleeding, unconscious, trapped. She risked everything to pull him out and waited quietly for help. The next day, instead of being praised, she was fired without a second thought. Broke, defeated, and questioning her own kindness, Tasha had no idea her life was about to take a turn no one could have predicted. The man she saved, a missing tech millionaire, and within 24 hours not one but two helicopters landed near her home, bringing a future beyond anything she'd ever dreamed of. What follows is a story of redemption, unexpected fortune, and how one act of selflessness can rewrite a destiny. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs inspiration today, and subscribe for more incredible stories that prove kindness is never wasted. It was just another rainy Tuesday evening in Atlanta, the kind of downpour that soaked everything and left the city streets glistening under the streetlights. The hustle of downtown had slowed as rush hour came to an end. But for Tasha Hill, a 24-year-old waitress, the night was far from over. She had just wrapped up a brutal double shift at the diner where she worked, and after hours of rushing between tables, refilling coffee cups and taking orders, all she wanted was to get home and collapse into bed. But the universe had other plans. Tasha's heart sank when she realized she had missed the last bus of the night. Her feet ached in her worn sneakers, and her shoulders felt heavy, weighed down by the exhaustion that seemed to settle deep in her bones. The rain made everything feel colder, and she knew she had two choices: wait for the next bus that would take forever to arrive, or walk. The thought of walking didn't seem appealing, but at least it would be faster. She pulled her jacket tighter around her body, shivering slightly in the cool air, and decided to take a shortcut through the wooded trail that ran behind the diner. It wasn't a well-lit path, but it was quieter and more peaceful than the busy street. Tasha had walked it a few times before. It was an escape from the noise of the city. The soft sounds of her footsteps on the wet ground were drowned by the rhythmic patter of the rain, and for the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of peace. The trail twisted through the trees and ended on a quieter street a few blocks from her apartment. She walked at a steady pace, allowing her mind to wander. It had been a tough few months. Bills piled up faster than she could pay them, and the small apartment she called home felt more cramped every day. The thought of a better future seemed almost like a dream. Suddenly, a loud screeching sound shattered her thoughts, followed by the sickening thud of metal crashing into something. Tasha froze, her heart racing. The sound of tires losing control echoed through the rain-soaked night. She looked up, and her eyes widened in shock. A black SUV, speeding far too fast for the wet conditions, skidded off the edge of the road, sliding toward the ditch. In a horrifying instant, the car flipped, the wheels spinning helplessly in the air before it slammed down with a loud crash, its frame crumpling as it landed in the deep ditch. For a moment, everything was still. The rain continued to pour, the silence that followed only broken by the sound of Tasha's rapid breaths. The crash had happened so suddenly, so violently, that it was hard to process what she was seeing. Someone was in that car. Her pulse quickened, and her feet moved before her mind could catch up. She ran toward the wreckage, adrenaline flooding her system. Her thoughts raced. What if he's hurt? What if he's unconscious? What if he needs help? The car was twisted and mangled, the headlights dim and flickering. Tasha's hand shook as she grabbed the door, pulling with all her strength, desperate to get it open. The metal screeched as it resisted her efforts. He was still inside. Finally, the door creaked open just enough for her to slip inside. The interior was a mess, shards of glass scattered on the seats, blood staining the fabric, and the air heavy with the smell of burning rubber. The man in the driver's seat was unconscious, his face pale and bloodied, his clothes torn. A sharp, shallow breath escaped his lips. He was alive but barely. Without thinking, Tasha reached into the car and gently touched his shoulder, trying to wake him, but he didn't respond. His head lolled to the side, his body limp. Panic set in, but Tasha pushed it away. She wasn't going to let him die here. With all her might she pulled him out of the seat, her arms straining under his weight. His body was heavy, unresponsive, but Tasha didn't stop. She dragged him out of the wreckage, inch by inch, the rain stinging her face as she struggled to lift him to safety. When she finally got him far enough from the car, she collapsed beside him, gasping for breath. The sound of sirens filled the air, and soon paramedics were rushing to the scene, taking over. Tasha stood up, soaked to the bone, and watched as the medical team worked quickly to stabilize the man. She didn't wait to see more. She turned and walked away, her shoes squelching in the mud, her heart still pounding in her chest. The ambulance sped away, the flashing lights disappearing into the night. Tasha didn't know the man's name. She didn't know anything about him, except that he was dressed in a suit more expensive than anything she could ever afford, and for a brief moment, she wondered if she had just saved a life, or if she had unknowingly changed her own forever. The next morning, Tasha Hill walked into the diner, her head still spinning from the events of the previous night. The sound of the ambulance sirens echoed in her mind as she made her way through the back door. She was exhausted, but somehow, the weight of what had happened still lingered with her. The crash, the man she saved, the fleeting feeling of making a real difference. She had gone to bed late, barely getting any sleep, but the hope of doing something good kept her going. That was, until she walked into the diner and saw the expression on her manager's face. The moment her manager, Tommy, saw her walk in, his expression hardened. His eyes narrowed in a way Tasha had never seen before. He was tall, with a broad frame, and usually spoke in a dry tone, but today, his voice was sharper, more cutting. "Tasha," he said, his words slow and deliberate, as though he was trying to suppress his frustration. "I need you in my office, now." Tasha felt her stomach churn. Something was wrong. She didn't know what, but the uneasy feeling was there. She followed him to the back office, a cramped, dimly lit room with peeling wallpaper, and a small desk piled high with receipts and dirty coffee mugs. It always smelled like grease and stale food, but today, the air felt thick, almost suffocating. Tommy closed the door behind her, his eyes cold and unblinking. He didn't even offer her a seat. "You left your shift early last night," he said, his tone flat. "You didn't even call. You just disappeared." Tasha's heart dropped. She had hoped this wouldn't come up. She opened her mouth to explain, to tell him what had happened, but he cut her off before she could get a word out. "You're unreliable. We're letting you go." Tasha blinked, stunned. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. What? You can't be serious." Tommy's gaze didn't soften. "I don't care what you think you did, Tasha. Rules are rules. You don't leave your shift early without notice, especially without calling. You're a liability." "That's not how things work here." Tasha felt her breath catch in her throat, her mind spinning as she tried to find the right words. But I saved someone's life. I couldn't just leave him there. He was hurt." Her voice trailed off as Tommy shook his head, dismissing her words as if they didn't matter. "Doesn't matter. You were paid to work a shift, not play hero." The silence in the room grew heavy, suffocating. As Tasha's thoughts began to spiral, she couldn't believe this was happening. She'd just risked her own safety to save a stranger's life, and now, the very thing she was proud of was costing her her job. She had done the right thing, hadn't she? But to Tommy, it didn't matter. His rules were far more important than any act of kindness. "Pack up your things," he said, finally breaking the silence. "You're done here." The finality of it hit Tasha all at once. She stood there for a moment, stunned, not sure how to respond. The world around her felt surreal, as if the ground had been ripped from beneath her feet. She had no job, no safety net. The one thing she had always relied on to get by had been torn away in a matter of seconds. But what stung the most was how humiliated she felt. She wasn't just losing a paycheck, she was being punished for doing something good. The thought made her feel small, like all her efforts had been in vain. She gathered her things, her hands shaking as she stuffed her apron into her bag. The feeling of rejection was sharp and bitter, and she couldn't shake the sting of betrayal as she walked out of the diner for the last time. Walking back to her apartment, Tasha felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. The rain had stopped, but the gray clouds still hung in the sky, reflecting her mood perfectly. She didn't know where she was going, or what she would do. All she knew was that she had helped someone in their moment of need, and now it had cost her everything. As she trudged through the empty streets, her mind kept replaying her decision to help the stranger. Had she made a mistake? Maybe she should have just kept walking, kept to herself. After all, who was she to think she could change someone's life? Little did she know, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't imagine. And the stranger she had saved wasn't just anyone. He had a story of his own, and it was far from over. The next morning, Tasha Hill woke to the sound of a low, vibrating hum in the air, like the earth itself was trembling. She rubbed her eyes groggily, trying to shake off the remnants of a restless night. She had barely slept, her thoughts consumed by the events of the previous. The sting of losing her job still weighed heavily on her heart, but her mind also kept replaying that moment, when she'd pulled the stranger from the wreckage. Had she made the right choice? The rumbling sound grew louder, shaking the walls of her small, cramped apartment. What in the world was that? Tasha threw on her slippers and dashed to the window, still half dazed from sleep. Her eyes went wide with disbelief as she stared outside, where two massive black helicopters were hovering just above the ground, their rotors whipping the air into a frenzy. The sound was deafening now, and her stomach twisted in confusion. She blinked, trying to process what she was seeing. Helicopters, in her neighborhood. They weren't just any helicopters, these were sleek, military-grade machines, their matte black surfaces, almost ominous against the gray sky. Tasha's neighbors had already begun to gather, peeking through windows, or stepping out onto their balconies, all phones out and recording. The air was thick with curiosity, the quiet hum of the helicopters drawing everyone's attention. People whispered in confusion, but Tasha could barely hear them over the roar of the chopper blades. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stood frozen in the middle of her apartment. She couldn't understand what was happening. She hadn't seen anything like this in her life. It was as if a movie was unfolding right in front of her eyes. Then the helicopters began to land, one after the other, in the empty lot behind her building. The ground shook under their weight, and dust rose into the air as the massive machines set. The roar of the engines gradually faded into a low hum, leaving an eerie quiet in their wake. Tasha could barely move. She felt like her body was rooted to the spot. There was no logical explanation for this. Why would two helicopters land here, in her neighborhood? Before she could gather her thoughts, the doors of the first helicopter swung open. A team of men in black suits stepped out, their expressions stern, their movements coordinated. They were followed by more men, carrying large bags and cases, moving quickly and efficiently. Tasha watched as they began walking toward the edge of the lot, toward her building, and then at the front of the group, she saw him, the man from the crash. Her heart skipped a beat. It was him, the stranger she had saved. But he didn't look like the broken, unconscious man she'd pulled from the wreckage the night before. He was clean, sharp, and undeniably confident, dressed in a tailored suit that looked far more expensive than anything she could ever afford. His demeanor was calm, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made it clear he was someone important. As he walked toward her, the group of men followed closely, carrying the heavy bags as if they were escorting him like royalty. Tasha's pulse quickened. What was happening? Why was he here? He stopped a few feet away from her, and for a moment, the world seemed to freeze. His eyes met hers, and he offered her a warm, genuine smile, the kind of smile that immediately put her at ease, despite the whirlwind of confusion around her. "Miss Hill," he said, his voice smooth and rich, with a calmness that immediately struck her. "My name is David Remington. You saved my life last night, and I never forget those who do." Tasha stared at him, her mouth hanging open slightly. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. David Remington, she'd never heard of him before. Who was he? What was all this? How do you know my name? She stammered, still trying to process what was happening. She glanced around at the men in suits, who stood behind him, watching her carefully, but not saying a word. He smiled again, his eyes never leaving hers. "I have a few people who help me stay informed. You might not recognize me, but I know exactly who you are, Miss Hill. You risked your life to pull me from that car wreck, and I'm here to make sure you're properly thanked." Tasha felt a lump form in her throat. Properly thanked. She hadn't expected anything from him. She hadn't even known who he was. But standing here now, in the presence of this mysterious man, Tasha could feel the gravity of the situation. Her life was about to change in a way she couldn't even begin to imagine. "Come with me," David said, gesturing toward the helicopters. "I think it's time we talk about your future." As Tasha stood there, still in shock from everything unfolding around her, David Remington's words hung in the air, thick with promise and mystery. Her heart raced, and she could feel the weight of the moment bearing down on her. This was no ordinary man standing in front of her. David wasn't just rich, he was one of the most influential tech CEOs in the world, known for his innovative companies and groundbreaking inventions. He had revolutionized industries, and his name was recognized globally. But until today, Tasha had never heard of him. She didn't follow tech news. She wasn't the kind of person to pay attention to millionaires or billionaires. But now, standing face to face with him, she realized just how little she knew about the man she had saved. "You're probably wondering who I am," David said, a knowing smile crossing his face. "I'm sure you've seen the news. I was recently declared missing. The media has been in a frenzy about it. They've been wondering where I've gone. The truth is, I was on my way to a very important meeting. A meeting that would have sealed a $900 million deal for my company." Tasha's mouth went dry. A $900 million deal? That was more money than she could ever fathom. More than a lifetime of hard work could bring. That was the meeting I was headed to when the accident happened, he continued, his voice steady but with a hint of something deeper, maybe gratitude, maybe something else. And if you hadn't pulled me from that wreck, I would be dead right now. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. That's not something I take lightly. Tasha swallowed hard, her mind still reeling from everything. A $900 million deal, dead, she was just a waitress. She had been tired, drained from her double shift, and had only acted on impulse, not thinking of the consequences. Now, here she was, standing in front of this man, who was thanking her for saving his life, and offering something she never imagined could be hers. David stepped closer, his tone shifting to something more sincere and direct. I'm not one to let debts go unpaid, Miss Hill. You saved my life, and I believe that when someone does something like that, they deserve more than just a thank you. Her heart pounded as she tried to process his words. He reached into the pocket of his suit and pulled out a sleek, gold-edged envelope. I want to offer you 3 things, he said, his voice calm yet unwavering. First, a luxury apartment in the heart of the city, fully paid, no rent, no bills, just a place for you to call home. Tasha blinked. This couldn't be real. She was used to scraping by, to counting every dollar, to stretching her paycheck just to make ends meet. The idea of living in a luxury apartment, her own place, free of worries, felt like a dream she could never reach. Second, David continued, I'm offering you a job as my personal advisor, starting salary 10 times what you were making at the diner. Tasha's knees nearly buckled. 10 times her old salary. That wasn't just a raise, it was a complete transformation of her life. But could she really take this offer? Was she qualified for something so prestigious? She was just a waitress, after all. And third, I want to ask you something. A question, David said, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. What do you want most in life? The question hung in the air, weighty and profound. Tasha hesitated, her mind swirling with thoughts. She hadn't planned for this moment. She hadn't expected her life to change so drastically, so suddenly. But there was one thing she knew deep down, something that had always been on her mind, something she had always dreamed of, but never believed was possible. She looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. I want to help people like me, she said quietly. People who don't get second chances, people who work hard every day, but never get the breaks they deserve. I want to help people who are stuck in a system that doesn't care about them, who can't escape their circumstances. I want to show them that they matter, that they have a chance. David smiled, the warmth in his expression softening the intensity of the moment. Then let's build that, he said, his voice steady but filled with a sense of purpose. I can help you make that happen. We can help change the system together. Tasha's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just an offer. This was a partnership, a chance to do something far bigger than anything she had ever imagined. A chance to not just survive, but to thrive and help others do the same. I'm in, she said, her voice clear and resolute. And in that moment, she knew her life would never be the same again. 3 months had passed since Tasha Hill's life had turned upside down. In those few short months, everything had changed. The quiet, struggling waitress had transformed into the founder of a nationwide movement, a beacon of hope for women who had been overlooked, underestimated, and forgotten by society. Tonight, Tasha stood backstage, her heart pounding with anticipation. She was wearing a sleek, black dress, her hair styled in soft waves, a far cry from the tired, hurried woman she once was, working double shifts in a diner. She glanced at the large sign behind her that read, The Hill Foundation, Creating Futures for the Forgotten. It wasn't just a name, it was a mission, a purpose, and a promise. With David Remington's financial backing, she had launched a program aimed at empowering women of color, giving them access to the tools, resources, and opportunities they needed to rebuild their lives. Through her foundation, women who had been marginalized and disenfranchised were finding jobs, housing, and most importantly hope. Tasha couldn't help but think back to the day when David had walked into her life, offering her a future she never thought possible. It had been hard to believe at first. A luxury apartment, a 6-figure salary, a prestigious position with a CEO worth billions, but she had taken a leap of faith, and in return, she had created something that would change lives. Tonight she was here to speak at the annual gala for the Hill Foundation, a celebration of what they had accomplished in such a short time. The venue was filled with the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses, the kind of environment that had always seemed far beyond her reach. Now she was the one leading it all. She was in charge, not just of her own future, but of countless others. As the host called her name, Tasha took a deep breath and stepped out onto the stage. The lights blazed down on her, and the room fell into an expectant hush. For a moment, her nerves flared up, but she steadied herself, remembering why she was there. When she spoke, her voice was strong, clear, and full of conviction. Thank you all for being here tonight, for supporting the Hill Foundation, and our mission to give women of color a fighting chance, she began. When I first started out, I never imagined I'd be standing here, in front of so many incredible people, celebrating the work we're doing. But here we are, and it's all thanks to David Remington, who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. The crowd erupted into applause. Tasha smiled, acknowledging David, who was sitting in the front row. He gave her a small nod of encouragement, and Tasha felt her chest swell with pride. She hadn't just been given a second chance. She had earned it. After the event wrapped up, Tasha stepped outside to the rooftop of her new apartment. The cool night air kissed her skin as she gazed up at the stars, lost in thought. The city lights stretched out before her, a dazzling sea of possibility. Everything had changed, but even so she couldn't help but remember where she came from, and the struggles she had faced just months before. A knock on the door interrupted her reverie. Tasha turned, surprised to see who stood there. It was Tommy, her old manager from the diner. Hey, he fumbled with his words, looking sheepish as he stood in the doorway. I saw you on TV. I didn't realize. Tasha smiled warmly, her expression softening. No worry, everyone deserves a second chance. For a moment, Tommy stood there, almost as if he didn't know what to say. It was clear that he felt some kind of guilt, though Tasha didn't hold any resentment toward him. People had their own limitations. He didn't know what it was like to struggle the way she had, to feel invisible. Now, however, she didn't have to prove anything to him. You know, Tommy continued, his voice a little quieter now, I was wrong about you. I didn't see it back then, but you've done something pretty incredible. Tasha chuckled softly, the weight of the past no longer heavy on her shoulders. It's not about me, it's about giving people like me the chance to change their stories. That's the real victory. As the night grew quiet, Tasha stood with Tommy, both gazing at the same city skyline, but from two very different perspectives. The girl who had once walked out of the diner in shame had come full circle, and now she was the one giving the world something even greater than she could ever have imagined. Hope, empowerment, and a future for those who had been forgotten. And in that moment, she knew that everything she had lost, every hardship, every tear, every door that had been slammed shut, had led her to this. Her second chance had become the world's second chance. Tasha Hill's journey is a testament to the truth that sometimes, life's most painful setbacks are not the end, they are merely the beginning of something greater. Her story wasn't just about one incredible moment when she saved a stranger's life. It was about the chain reaction that followed, a series of events that would lead her to a future she had never dreamed possible. At first, it seemed like Tasha's life was spiraling downward. After that fateful night when she saved David Remington, she had no idea what would come next. Instead of being celebrated for her bravery, she was fired from her job. Her manager didn't see her heroism. He only saw that she had broken the rule. To him it didn't matter that she had pulled a man from a wrecked car. She had left work early, and that was all that mattered. For most people, being fired under those circumstances would feel like the end of the road. It would be easy to give up, to let the frustration and humiliation overwhelm you. But Tasha didn't give in to despair. Instead, she made a choice. She acted out of the goodness of her heart, and no setback, no matter how big, could take that away from her. When David Remington showed up at her door days later, offering her an unimaginable future, Tasha had no idea what would happen. He didn't just offer her money, a job or status, he offered her a platform to do something meaningful. With his support, Tasha launched the Hill Foundation, a non-profit organization designed to help women of color find jobs, housing, and opportunities that had long been denied to them. It wasn't just a career shift for Tasha, it was a calling, a chance to turn her experience of struggle into a force for change in the world. She didn't just want to help herself, she wanted to help others who were as overlooked and underappreciated as she had once been. What is truly remarkable about Tasha's story is that her success didn't come because she was born into privilege, or because she was handed everything on a silver platter. She didn't need wealth to make an impact. What Tasha had was something far more valuable, heart, in the form of compassion, empathy, and a desire to make the world better for others. That was her secret weapon. It wasn't her bank account that made her important. It was her drive to lift others up, to give them the second chances they deserve.
Tasha's willingness to step outside of her own circumstances and help a stranger in need set off a chain of events that would change not only her life but the lives of countless others. From being fired for doing the right thing, to standing side by side with a millionaire CEO as a partner in changing the world, Tasha's journey proves one powerful truth: you don't need wealth to be important, you need heart. There are people out there, just like Tasha, who may be struggling, working hard, and doing the right thing, but feel like the world doesn't notice. The system may be broken, but as Tasha's story shows us, there is always a way to create change. Whether it's through small acts of kindness or bold moves to challenge the status quo, one person's decision to make a difference can alter the course of not just their own life, but the lives of others. Tasha's story is a reminder that our destinies are often disguised as obstacles. What feels like a setback, like being fired or facing adversity, may just be the universe's way of redirecting us to a greater purpose. Sometimes, it's in the moments of greatest challenge that we find our true calling. As Tasha proved, the key to success isn't in the wealth we accumulate, or the titles we hold. It's in the heart we bring to the table, the impact we have on the lives of others, and the legacy we leave behind. And in the end, that's what truly makes someone important. Not the wealth they amass, but the good they do. So the next time life feels like it's pushing you down, remember Tasha's story. Your next chapter might be just around the corner, waiting for you to take a leap of faith, to make a decision that could change not just your life, but the world around you. If Tasha's story resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that will leave you inspired. Whether they're based on real-life events or fictional tales, we're here to show you how one act of kindness, no matter how small, can have a ripple effect, changing lives and opening doors you never expected. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell us, what would you do if 2 helicopters suddenly landed in your backyard? Would you be ready for the adventure of a lifetime, or would you hesitate? We want to know your thoughts, because sometimes the craziest moments can lead to the most incredible changes. Thanks for watching, and remember, your story isn't over yet. No matter where you are in life, there's always time to turn the page and begin your next chapter.